Hey, New Life, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really just looking forward to bringing you some conversations that our church has been diving into, trying to understand and just help ourselves become more unified with our brothers and sisters as we're talking about race in this series and just all the tensions going on in our country and around the world. So I get the honor of bringing you some of my good friends today from our New Life family. This is Maddie.
Hello.
This is Jess.
Hello.
And Colin.
Hi.
But Jess, maybe I can let you introduce your family a little bit.
So this is Colin. He's my 23-year-old man. I guess it's weird to say that, but yes, this is my young man of a son. He's 23, and he's here to talk to us about race today and how we can interact with each other. And then Maddie, of course, a lot of you know, have seen her many times on stage, and she's my 18-year-old daughter, and we're here to share our story.
Yeah. Can you just tell us a little bit, as the mother of a biracial African American, how is the way that you raised Colin and Maddie maybe different, and what ways did you ensure that Colin had access to both cultures and families?
Yeah, so it definitely is different but similar. It's kind of a strange combination. First, I just want to preface that, this is just my perspective as a white woman raising a biracial son, and I raised Colin and Madeline primarily by myself. So, there was just me in the home. But in raising Maddie and Colin together, the great thing is they both got to learn a little bit of their differences, and it was so easy for them to accept it, right? Because they grew up with each other. The differences that I had to teach were approaches to how the outer world sees us from a standpoint, or not necessarily just us, but sees Colin when there are differences. And one of the pastors that we were talking to the other day on a Zoom call, he said, to say that I don't see color is somewhat arrogant, because
that.
Yes, I mean, it was a great thing, because the truth is, people, we see the differences in each other.
Mm-hmm.
The differences is you either accept and embrace those things, or you don't. So Maddie and Colin got that early on in their lives, to accept each other. They didn't know any different. So for them, Colin didn't see that Maddie was white, and Maddie didn't see that Colin was black. It was only when we were introduced to societal things that those differences changed. So, when, and these guys can step in a little bit, but, when they're going through school, someone might, and we're together, they're confused why Colin has a white mother. Or if Maddie is referring to her big brother playing lacrosse, and she describes who he is, they're like, wait, I know who that is. How does that happen? Are you adopted? Or is he adopted? So there's some confusion that happens. Yeah. And that's okay. Confusion's okay, but acceptance of the possibility of that, and maybe not questioning it, I think is the big thing. So the way I did, I would say, train them. It's a weird concept, but for example, Colin going in, especially when he started driving and being by himself more often, it was different, because as he got older, I didn't have as much control over who he was with, where he was going, who he was, the interactions that he would have. And, I know there's been a couple occasions where Colin's been pulled over by the police, and for whatever reference, and I don't know all of those, and there's been a few times this has happened, but for example, his truck is in my name along with the insurance, and they ask for insurance cards and registration and your driver's license, and of course Colin gives it to him very respectively and does that, but the response back is how are you related to this person with this vehicle? And he says, well, it's my mother, and the next question is, well, she's white. Why would anybody even think to ask that, right? So there's things like that, but also, for Colin, driving down the street and getting pulled over, keep your hands at 10 and 2. Don't make any swift actions. yes sir, no sir, polite sir, be very polite, even if you know that you're in the right, things like that. Keep your hood down. There's many things like that we're taught to Colin differently than Madeline, because Madeline and me both, we can walk down the street and not be presumed harmful, or anything else by the color of our skin.
I know it crushed me the first time. I don't know if crush me is the right word, but it weighed really heavy the first time that you explained some of those fears as a mom, because I was thinking about my sons who are 10 and thinking I can't imagine that fear. And the fact that I can't means that there is a big difference. I have a lot of fears for my kids. I have a lot of fears of the things that they're going to get into and the things that the choices they're going to make.
Right.
But I don't fear for their safety when they leave the house in the way that you do, and that hit me really hard.
Yeah. I think a lot of this conversation comes out of, there's been a lot of deaths most recently, but it's been happening for hundreds of years. And behaviors that we feel as white people, that we've been ingrained through our ancestry, and we might not even know that we're doing some of these things. So I think that plays part of it too, is just being self-aware, understanding what the differences are, and know that they're there, and know that we have to change them. And I think that it starts with us.
Yeah.
I just think about the prospect of when I was young, and I was told, there were things that I was told by my family that I needed to fear. If walking into a room with primarily black people, protect yourself, know your surroundings. And I just remember feeling very uncomfortable the first time I ever did that, walking into a room. But what I have found, and what I found through that experience was, I was uncomfortable, but it grew me. It made me understand that people that are of different color are just like me. Color doesn't make them any different than the way I feel,
Doesn't change anything on the inside.
Exactly. We all bleed red, So I think that there's those types of things that I've experienced over my life that have helped prepare me, but I knew that I never would be able to give him the same experiences that a black family or African American family would prefer, or their cultures and their experiences. So for me, those things, I had to get him, he had to have some sort of interaction, because I wouldn't be able to give them to him. I can't relate on that level. I still can't. I mean, he knows that.
It's definitely hard walking out every morning, not knowing what's going to happen. I mean, it is for everybody too. No matter what race you are, like I said earlier, everyone is the same race. We're all human, inside and out, but with a different skin color. That's extremely hard, because you have no idea what's going to happen.
I loved what Pastor T.D. Jakes said the other morning, and I don't think I'd get the quote exactly right, but he said something about God painted us all in different color, and he didn't have to go blind to love us the same.
Right.
And so we shouldn't claim to be colorblind, but we should love each other the same. And I thought that was so cool.
Powerful.
We're his canvas, and he wanted the differences in our skin tones. Maddie, you were sharing a little bit with me about being Colin's sister and some of the experiences that the two of you have had with people assuming that you can't be related.
Yes.
So will you guys share that with us again? Because I think that there's a lot to learn in when we approach families that have multiple colored skin, what's the best way to approach that if we have that curiosity that just apparently has to be answered?
Yes. I think that everyone's obviously different, so you don't always want to approach a group of people or a family the same as you would other people. But I do think that it's important to ask, because you need to have the willingness to learn in order for the change to happen. And I think that that's really important. But I was really blessed with having an African American brother, because I obviously didn't learn it the same way somebody, I don't know how to really explain that, but like I grew up with him, so I knew that those stereotypes didn't matter and they didn't hold any value. But I grew up with him, so I know that he has value, and he's just the same as I am. He's just a different shade of color. So, yeah, but there are some people that
So you get assumptions that you guys are dating.
Or
that
friends.
one of you is adopted.
One of us is adopted. Yeah.
No matter what.
Is that irritating?
When I was younger, I thought it was extremely irritating, especially when we first moved to Mattawan, because I'd go to school, and she doesn't even know this like, at all. But when my first week at Mattawan, just about every single kid kept asking me if I was adopted. Just about every single one.
Did they know your family?
They had no idea. Well, they seen me walking around with my mom.
Okay.
They didn't know about Maddie at the time, and I think it was that Friday of that week. I think everything just like all my feelings and anger just like bottled up and just exploded because someone asked me again, and I flipped out, and I ended up getting a couple fights because of it. But after that, day by day went out, and as I got older, I just realized like I don't really care what other people think. I mean, you're no different from what I am.
Yeah.
And that ever since then, that's how I've lived my life. Like, if you think ill of me, so be it. I know I'm perfectly fine the way I am. I know I'll go on about my life being happy.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep doing what you're doing, by all means, do it. Just let me know how you feel about yourself at the end of the day. If you're happy with what you decided to think or say, then God help that you find something in your heart that changes your mind on all of that. If not, then I don't know what I could say or do.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point that I hadn't even run by you guys, but my sons are in the same school that you went to, and we were talking the other night about everything going on, and I said, buddies, it's time for us to start intentionally every single night just praying for our country and for this divide. And I said, and I want you praying specifically for your friends who are African American, because they're in a tough spot. And my middle son looked at me and he goes, but Mom, in my school, I only have one friend who's African American. And I was like, well, this is part of our problem.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that you felt very singled out because it is primarily a white community.
You know, I think about the protests that are going on right now, and so many of them are so meaningful, and it's the right thing to do. But man, for those people who are doing wonderful at peaceful protests, and then those people who maybe take it a little bit too far and, you know, damage and destroy things, are they there for the same purpose? You know, and I'm not sure if that's right.
I would have to say,
yeah.
in my mind, maybe not.
Right. You know, I thought I was looking at in Colorado, and it might have been Denver, where they were doing a protest, and it was the first time I saw people laying down, face down on the ground with their hands behind their back, and laying as George Floyd did while he was being killed by this police officer. And that is so much more meaningful to me than someone destroying property, because sorry.
No, you're okay. Do you want to take a minute?
Okay. Those are the minutes when I most often experience that could be my son. And those minutes makes me angry. It makes me terrified for him. And it makes me so angry that someone feels so much as if a human life is not worth stopping and thinking before you react. And there are times when force is necessary through police officers, and not every police officer is a bad police officer. As a matter of fact, the majority of them are great.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine, I cannot, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, is I haven't looked at the video fully. And it's not out of not wanting to recognize what happened. It's sheerly out of fear that it could be my son. And there would be an uprising if it were my son, I can guarantee you. And I think that that's why people are where they're at right now. And I read something today as I was at work listening to an integration program for work, and someone mentioned this is a movement, not a moment. And that was perfect. This is a movement and a time today where we're so much more advanced in our thought processes and the way we relate to each other. It's a movement, not a moment. It has to occur now and forever, and always be working on it and making it better. And folks, I don't know how to help you understand, but if you think about if the roles were reversed and Colin wasn't the minority, but we were, and your son was laying on the ground because of his color, him being white, no other reason to pick someone out of a crowd for being black or whatever, but because they're mostly abused through this process. African Americans are that. You can look at the stats for it. But just for one moment, close your eyes and think.
And you being willing to talk to us is huge. So thank you.
It's not a problem.
For all of you, we want healing so bad for our nation. We know that it begins with prayer. We know that it begins with conversations, understanding, and friendship. How can we be praying for you during everything that's going on in our country? All of you.
Do you want to go first, Maddie?
I would say first off that the Black community needs so much love right now. Because Colin is a part of my family, I feel not necessarily the same pain, but I can understand how they might feel with everything happening, going on. So I just think that they just need so much love and prayer and peace and justice in this world right now. And I think that that's the biggest thing that we can pray for right now.
Honestly, I'd say pray for anybody that wakes up in the morning, goes on about their day, and comes home completely safe and unharmed, no matter what race you are. As long as you come home happy, you leave home happy, and you repeat that cycle every single day, I think eventually this world will come into an agreement that everybody is the same no matter what color they are. I'm honestly tired of all this stuff. I am sick and tired of it. It's been going on for way too long. It's been, over 400 years, 200 years, 246 years, something like that. And all this stuff is still going on. What's the point? What is the point in all this? I see nothing why this needs to continue the way it is. But that's just coming from me.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that if we love people the way that Christ wants us to love people, the way that He loves people, we wouldn't see all of this going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I pray that people open their hearts to learning and to accepting people's truths, because your truth is not my truth. It's not Colin's truth. It's not Maddie's. So I think that that's important because, I've actually seen it on Facebook recently, and I try not to, Facebook is like a crazy addiction, right? But people all have their own truths, but they're not open to other people's truths, And because it didn't happen in the way that they thought that it was going to happen, doesn't mean that it didn't happen the way that that person felt it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been an advocate of, Maddie has probably heard me say it 100 times, Kellen too, is your feelings are your feelings. No one can tell you how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to be able to learn and accept other people's feelings about things. So even though you don't think something's one way because you haven't experienced it, or maybe even you experienced it differently, even in the same situation, it might be different for the next person. So my prayer is that people open their hearts to listening to understand, not be afraid to ask questions. It's okay. If anybody else at the church wants to hear from us, we're more than happy to. We don't know all the answers first. No.
Come on.
We set ourselves up for anything.
Yeah, right. We certainly don't know all the answers. And this is only our perception of how our lives are. And there's many, many, many more people that have a different story to tell, and are probably more than willing to share those stories. And I encourage those people to come forward if they're willing to do that, and are open to sharing their stories for growth. That's the biggest thing is, yes, I know you're angry. I'm angry too. And I think it's important to feel anger through this, but what we're doing right now and what Colin's sharing, I hope helps him step away from the anger and wanting to lash out, and more of, I need to explain this because it hurts me and I need some resolve. I need something different. So I feel like if we start that conversation, and it might just start, and this conversation should have been happening for hundreds of years.
Like Colin said.
Yeah. And it has in small parts, but I think now we really have to take a conscious effort all the time to have this conversation. And I can't remember if it was you or Kelsey, it had to have been you maybe, we were talking about school and history of slavery and history of racism and history of those things. And some things are not present today, but some things are. And are we talking enough about that?
I think it was you and I, because
Yeah.
I was saying that I realized through everything going on with the George Floyd situation that my boys, whether taught directly or whether just taught up to the civil rights movement and then nothing more, believed that racism was done.
Yeah.
They believed it was gone. And they were shocked to hear some of what's going on and to see some of the protests. And that really saddened me. That's not there's no one to blame. That's not our teacher's fault.
Right.
But I think that as an entire society, we have to choose to see the areas that we have to change.
Yep.
And educate. Yeah.
Yeah, and
if our kids don't know, then we can't make that change last.
Absolutely. And I think you make a good point. I mean, the teachers are told to teach a particular curriculum. And I do feel like our administrators and, our pastors or leaders, all of our leaders should really consider, and what we're doing right now, with Dan and Kelsey reaching out to different pastors of color and just asking the questions and teaching. We, as white people, we can't teach this. This is not something that we can do. I can't do it as a mother of a biracial son. I don't have the same experience. So I think it's something that, we need to bring back more into our children's lives, especially as children get older and can start to understand things a little bit more. The buddies are 10, yeah. So I mean, they're starting to understand the differences in people now, and I think this is a critical time for them to learn and experience something that they wouldn't experience through the eyes of someone else. And I think that that's important.
Yeah.
And so the education has to start now.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to be like, okay, I need to evaluate what that means, because there's a huge long past that I have never
that you weren't
experienced.
a part of. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never experienced that kind of pain for being discriminated against just because of how I look on the
Yeah.
outside. So just remembering.
Yeah.
That's huge.
When I got pregnant with Colin, which was 4 years ago, oh my gosh, a while ago. And, 20 years before that, Colin's dad could have been murdered. Colin could have been taken away from me. I could have been taken away from him. And that's a scary place too. And the preacher the other day, on Sunday, had said, it wasn't that long ago. We forget. It was not that long ago,
Yeah.
and he is so right. It's not. And we just have to remind ourselves that we have a lot more work to do. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much
Thanks
you.
for
for
having
being
us.
willing to talk to us and to share your experience. And we hope that this will open up a lot more conversations for us to talk to other friends and family inside New Life and outside New Life, just to get a better understanding. So,
We hope so too.
yeah.
Yeah.